It's strange how a single envelope can bring the past rushing back, no matter how many years have gone by. I was standing at the kitchen counter, sorting through the usual stack of bills and catalogs when I saw it. My hands froze. There in the middle of the pile was a plain white envelope, the handwriting neat and unfamiliar. But what made my heart stop was the name written on the front. Mr. Thomas E. Harper, my late husband, gone for 2 decades, but suddenly in that moment, as real as the day I lost him. Before I go on, I want to ask you, where are you from? I love hearing from women all over, from small towns and big cities, from every corner of the country. It reminds me that we're all connected, that our stories matter. So if you're listening, please comment below and tell me where you're watching from. And if this story touches your heart, give it a like and subscribe. It means more to me than you know. Back to that morning. I stood there, staring at the envelope, my mind racing. I turned it over in my hands, half expecting it to vanish, to be some kind of mistake. But there it was, my address, my husband's name, and a postmark from a town I didn't recognize. I felt a chill run down my spine. For a moment, I wondered if I should even open it. Maybe it was meant for someone else. Maybe it was just a clerical error, a piece of mail that had been lost in the system for years. But curiosity got the better of me. I sat down at the kitchen table, the morning sun streaming through the window, and carefully slit the envelope open with a butter knife. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded neatly. I unfolded it, my hands trembling, and began to read, "Dear Tom, I hope this letter finds you well. It's been a long time, and I know this may come as a surprise. I've thought about writing to you for years, but I never had the courage until now. There are things I need to say, things I should have said a long time ago. I hope you can forgive me for reaching out after all this time." The letter was signed simply, Margaret. I read it again, my heart pounding. The words were vague, full of regret and longing, but there was no mention of why she was writing or what she wanted. I tried to remember if Tom had ever mentioned a Margaret. The name sounded familiar, but I couldn't place it. Was she an old friend? A colleague? Someone from his past I never met? I sat there for a long time, the letter spread out in front of me, memories swirling in my mind. I thought about the years I'd spent with Tom, the laughter, the arguments, the quiet moments at the end of the day. I thought about the way he'd always kept his past close to the vest, never one to dwell on old stories or lost loves. I wondered if this letter was a piece of a puzzle I'd never known existed. That afternoon, I called my daughter, Susan. She listened patiently as I told her about the letter, her voice full of concern. "Do you think it's real, Mom? Maybe it's just a scam." I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. "It doesn't feel like a scam. It feels personal. I just wish I knew who she was." Susan was quiet for a moment. "Do you want me to come over? We can look through Dad's old things, see if we find anything." I agreed, grateful for the company. That evening, Susan arrived with a bottle of wine and a stack of old photo albums. We sat at the kitchen table, flipping through the pages,
searching for any sign of Margaret. There were pictures of Tom at work parties, family vacations, high school reunions, but no Margaret. As the night wore on, we grew tired and a little frustrated. Maybe she was just a friend, Susan said, trying to reassure me. Or maybe it's nothing, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. I lay awake that night, the letter on my nightstand, wondering what secrets Tom had taken to his grave. The next morning, I decided to write back. I didn't know what I would say, or if the letter would even reach her, but I needed answers. I found a piece of stationery, sat down at the kitchen table, and began to write. Dear Margaret, I'm writing on behalf of my late husband, Tom Harper. He passed away 20 years ago, but your letter found its way to our home. If you're comfortable, I'd like to know more about why you wrote. I hope you're well. Sincerely, Evelyn Harper. I mailed the letter that afternoon, my heart heavy with questions. I didn't know if I would ever hear back, but I felt a strange sense of relief, as if I'd taken the first step towards uncovering a truth I didn't even know I was missing.
The days that followed were filled with a restless kind of waiting. Every time the mail truck rumbled down the street, I found myself glancing out the window, half hoping, half dreading another letter. I tried to keep busy, baking bread, tending the garden, calling friends, but my mind always drifted back to Margaret's words. Who was she to Tom? What had she meant by things I should have said a long time ago? I replayed every memory, every story Tom had ever told me, searching for a clue. Susan called every evening to check in. "Any news, Mom?" she'd ask, her voice gentle. "Not yet," I'd reply, trying to sound casual. Maybe it was just a fluke. Maybe she won't write back. But deep down, I knew Margaret's letter was no accident. There was a reason it had found its way to me after all these years. A week later, another envelope arrived. This one was thicker, the handwriting the same. My hands shook as I opened it, my heart pounding in my chest. Dear Evelyn, thank you for writing back. I'm so sorry to hear about Tom's passing. I didn't know, and I wish I'd reached out sooner. I hope you don't mind me saying this, but Tom was a very important part of my life, even if it was a long time ago. I suppose I owe you an explanation. Tom and I met in college. We were close, very close, for a few years. Life took us in different directions, but I never forgot him. I always wondered what might have been if things had turned out differently. I'm not writing to cause trouble or to dredge up old wounds. I just wanted to say thank you for loving him, for giving him a good life. I hope you can forgive me for reaching out after all this time. With warm regards, Margaret. I read the letter over and over, trying to make sense of it. Tom had never mentioned a Margaret from college. We'd met in our late 20s, after he'd already started his career. I realized there was a whole chapter of his life I knew nothing about, a chapter he'd never shared. That evening, I called Susan and read her the letter. She was quiet for a long time. "Do you think Dad loved her?" she finally asked. I hesitated. "I don't know. Maybe. But he chose me. He built a life with me. That's what matters." Still, the questions lingered. I found myself looking at Tom's old things with new eyes. His college yearbooks, the box of letters he'd kept in the attic, the faded photographs tucked into the back of his desk drawer. I spent hours sorting through them, searching for Margaret's face, for her name, for any sign of the woman who had written to him after all these years. One afternoon, I found a photograph I'd never seen before. It was tucked inside a book of poetry, the edges worn soft with age. In the picture, Tom stood beside a young woman with dark hair and a bright smile. On the back, in Tom's handwriting, was a single word, Margaret. I stared at the photo, my heart aching. She was beautiful, and there was something in the way Tom looked at her, a tenderness, a joy, that made me feel both jealous and grateful. Jealous because I'd never known that part of him. Grateful because he'd loved deeply even before he met me. That night, I dreamed of Tom, young and laughing, his arm around Margaret, the two of them dancing under the stars. I woke up with tears on my cheeks, missing him more than ever, but also feeling a strange sense of peace. His life had been full, even before I came into it. And maybe that was okay. The next morning, I wrote to Margaret again. Dear Margaret, thank you for your honesty. I found a photograph of you and Tom and his things. You looked happy. I hope you know that Tom had a good life and that he was loved. I'm glad he had someone like you in his past. If you'd like, I'd love to hear more about your time together. Maybe we can share stories about Tom, about the people we were, about the lives we built. With kindness, Evelyn. I mailed the letter and felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I didn't know what would come next, but I was ready to face it with honesty, with courage, and with an open heart. A few days later, another letter arrived. I recognized Margaret's handwriting immediately, and my hands trembled as I opened the envelope. This time, the letter was longer, and as I read, I felt the years between us and Tom melt away. Dear Evelyn, thank you for your kindness. I was afraid you'd be angry or hurt or simply ignore me, but your words meant more than I can say. I'm glad you found that photograph. Tom and I were happy for a time. We met in a poetry class. He was shy, but he had a way of making everyone laugh. We spent long afternoons in the library talking about books and dreams. He loved music, did you know that? He played the guitar badly, but with so much heart. We dated for almost 3 years. I thought we'd get married, but life had other plans. My father got sick and I had to move home to help my family. Tom was starting his career and we drifted apart. We wrote letters for a while, but eventually the distance grew too much. I always wondered what would have happened if I'd stayed, if I'd fought harder for us. But I see now that he was meant to find you and to build a life and a family. I'm grateful for that. I never married. I had a good life, friends, work, travel, but I always carried a piece of Tom with me. I hope you don't mind me saying that. I just wanted you to know that he was loved, even before you met him. Thank you for letting me share this with you. If you'd like, I'd love to hear about your life with Tom. What was he like as a husband, as a father? What made him happy? With gratitude, Margaret. I sat at the kitchen table, the letter spread out before me, tears streaming down my face. I felt a strange mix of emotions. Sadness for the love Margaret and Tom had lost, gratitude for the life I'd shared with him, and a deep sense of connection to this woman I'd never met. That evening, I called Susan and read her the letter. She listened quietly, then said, "It sounds like Dad was lucky to have loved two wonderful women. And you're both lucky to have loved him." I smiled.
feeling a warmth in my chest. I think you're right, sweetheart. That night, I pulled out my own box of memories. Letters Tom had written me, photographs of our wedding, cards he'd given me on birthdays and anniversaries. I spent hours reading and remembering, letting the memories wash over me. I realized that Tom's life was bigger than just our years together. He'd been shaped by the people he'd loved, the choices he'd made, the dreams he'd chased. The next morning, I wrote back to Margaret. Dear Margaret, thank you for sharing your memories with me. I never knew Tom played the guitar. He never played for me, but he did love music. He used to sing to our children when they were little, and he always insisted on dancing with me in the kitchen, even when there was no music at all. Tom was a wonderful husband, steady, kind, and full of quiet humor. He worked hard, but he always made time for family. He loved fishing, gardening, and reading mystery novels. He was a patient father, always willing to listen, always ready with a story or a joke. He made our house a home.
I miss him every day, but I'm grateful for the years we had. I'm grateful, too, for your honesty and your kindness. I think Tom would be happy to know that we found each other, that we could share our memories and keep his spirit alive. With friendship, Evelyn. I mailed the letter and felt a sense of peace settle over me. I realized that while Tom was gone, the love he'd given to me, to Margaret, to our family, was still here, still shaping our lives. Over the next few weeks, Margaret and I exchanged more letters. We shared stories, recipes, even a few old jokes Tom used to tell. I learned about her travels, her work as a teacher, her love of poetry and art. She learned about my family, my garden, my adventures with the grandchildren. We became friends, bound by our love for the same man, by our willingness to be honest and vulnerable with each other. Susan was fascinated by our correspondence. It's like you're both piecing together a puzzle, she said one afternoon as we sat in the garden. You're finding new parts of Dad, even after all these years. I nodded, feeling a sense of wonder. I think that's what love does, Susan. It keeps growing, even after someone is gone. As autumn deepened, the letters between Margaret and I became a cherished ritual. Every week, I'd find her familiar handwriting in my mailbox, and I'd sit at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, savoring her words. Sometimes her letters were full of stories about Tom, about her own adventures, about the little joys and sorrows of her days. Other times, they were simply reflections on life, on aging, on the ways we both had learned to carry loss and gratitude side by side. One afternoon, as I was raking leaves in the yard, Susan stopped by with the grandchildren. She found me sitting on the porch, reading Margaret's latest letter. "You look happy, Mom," she said, settling beside me. "I think these letters have been good for you." I smiled, folding the letter and tucking it into my pocket. They have. It's like having a window into another part of Tom's life, and it's helped me remember that love doesn't end, it just changes. Susan nodded, her eyes thoughtful. "Do you ever feel jealous or sad, knowing Dad loved someone before you?" I thought about it for a moment. I did at first, but now I just feel grateful. Grateful that he was loved so well, and that I get to know that part of him too. It's made me appreciate our years together even more.
That evening, after the grandchildren had gone home, I sat by the fire and wrote to Margaret. Dear Margaret, your last letter made me smile. I can just picture Tom strumming that old guitar and singing off-key. Thank you for sharing those memories with me. I've been thinking about how lucky we both were to have known him, to have been loved by him in different seasons of his life.
I wanted to tell you about the garden. Tom planted roses for me every year on our anniversary. They're blooming now, even as the weather turns cold. I like to think he's still here, in the flowers, in the laughter of our grandchildren, in the stories we share. I hope you're well. I hope you know how much your friendship means to me. With love, Evelyn. As the weeks passed, Margaret and I began to talk about meeting in person. She lived just a few hours away, and we both felt a growing sense that it was time. We made plans for her to visit in November, just after the leaves had finished falling and before the first snow. The day Margaret arrived, I was nervous. I'd set out tea and cookies, arranged fresh flowers on the table, and even put on a dress Tom had always liked. When she knocked on the door, I opened it to find a woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile, her hair silver and her hands warm as she hugged me. We spent the afternoon talking, laughing, and even crying a little. We shared photographs, told stories, and filled in the gaps of Tom's life. Her years with him, my years with him, the ways he'd changed and grown. It was strange and beautiful to feel so close to someone I'd only just met. Margaret stayed for dinner, and Susan joined us with the grandchildren. The children were fascinated by Margaret's stories of their grandfather as a young man, his love of poetry, his adventures in college, the way he'd once tried to impress her by cooking a disastrous meal. We all laughed, and I saw in Susan's eyes the same gratitude I felt. After Margaret left, Susan hugged me tight. Thank you for sharing this with us, Mom. I think Dad would be happy to see us all together. I nodded, feeling a deep sense of peace. I think so too, sweetheart. That night, as I sat by the window watching the moon rise over the garden, I realized how much my world had changed since that first letter arrived. I'd found a new friend, a new understanding of Tom, and a new sense of connection to the past and the future. I knew there would still be days when I missed Tom so much it hurt. Days when the house felt too quiet, when the ache of loss was sharp and fresh. But I also knew that I was not alone. I had Susan. I had the grandchildren. I had Margaret, and I had the memories that would always be a part of me. Margaret's visit marked a turning point in my life.
After she left, we continued to write. But now our letters were filled with new memories of our meeting, of the laughter we'd shared, of the comfort we'd found in each other's company. I realized that in opening my heart to Margaret, I'd opened a door to healing I hadn't known I needed. The holidays approached, and the house filled with the familiar chaos of family. Susan and the grandchildren decorating the tree, the smell of cinnamon and pine, the sound of carols on the radio. I found myself looking forward to Christmas in a way I hadn't in years. I invited Margaret to join us, and to my delight, she accepted.
On Christmas Eve, the house was alive with warmth and light. Margaret arrived with a tin of homemade cookies and a small wrapped package. She fit right in, sharing stories with the grandchildren, helping Susan in the kitchen, and even joining us for a round of carols by the fire. That night, as we sat together in the glow of the tree, Margaret handed me the package. "I found this in an old box of Tom's things," she said softly. "I thought you should have it." Inside was a letter, one Tom had written to Margaret but never sent. I unfolded the paper, my hands trembling, and read his words. "Dear Margaret, I hope you're well. I think of you often, and I hope you've found happiness. I want you to know that I'm grateful for the time we shared, for the love you gave me, for the way you helped me become the man I am. I'm happy now, married, with a family, a good life. I hope you are too. Thank you for everything. With love, Tom." Tears filled my eyes as I read the letter. I looked at Margaret, and she smiled, her own eyes shining. "He loved you, Evelyn. I could see it in every word he wrote." I hugged her, feeling a sense of closure, of peace. "Thank you, Margaret, for sharing this with me, for being my friend." Christmas morning was filled with laughter and joy. The grandchildren tore open their presents. Susan made her famous cinnamon rolls, and Margaret and I sat together, watching the chaos with happy hearts. I realized that for the first time in a long time, I felt whole. As the new year began, I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened since that first letter arrived. I thought about the pain of discovering a part of Tom's past I'd never known, the fear of what it might mean, the courage it took to reach out to Margaret, and the healing that had come from our friendship. I started writing again, not just letters, but stories, memories, little pieces of my life I wanted to share with Susan and the grandchildren. I realized that while Tom was gone, his love was still here, woven into the fabric of our family, shaping our days, guiding our hearts. Margaret and I made plans to travel together in the spring, a trip to the coast, to see the wildflowers and walk along the beach. Susan encouraged me, promising to take care of the house and the garden while I was away. "You deserve this, Mom," she said. "You've spent your whole life taking care of everyone else. It's time to do something for yourself." As winter melted into spring, I felt a sense of anticipation,
a readiness for whatever the future might bring. I knew there would still be hard days, still be moments when the ache of missing Tom would catch me by surprise. But I also knew that I was not alone. I had Susan, I had the grandchildren, I had Margaret, and I had the memories that would always be a part of me. One evening, as I sat on the porch watching the first crocuses bloom, I slipped Tom's ring onto my finger and whispered a quiet thank you for the years we shared, for the lessons I'd learned, for the strength to keep going. I realized that while grief would always be a part of my story, it didn't have to be the whole story. I could choose joy, choose hope, choose to keep living and loving no matter what.
Spring brought with it a sense of renewal I hadn't felt in years. The garden came alive with color, and I spent my mornings planting seeds, talking to Tom as I worked, telling him about my plans with Margaret and the grandchildren. The air was full of bird song and the promise of new beginnings. Margaret and I finalized our travel plans. A week by the coast, just the two of us, exploring lighthouses, collecting seashells, and sharing stories late into the night. Before we left, Susan and the grandchildren threw us a little going-away party. The house was filled with laughter, the smell of fresh bread, and the sound of Ethan playing the piano. Margaret fit right in, helping the children decorate cupcakes and telling them stories about their grandfather as a young man. I watched them all, my heart full, and realized how much my world had grown since that first letter arrived. The trip with Margaret was everything I'd hoped for and more. We walked along wind-swept beaches, our hair tangled by the salty breeze, our pockets full of shells and pebbles. We visited little towns, ate fresh seafood, and spent long afternoons sitting on the porch of our rented cottage, watching the waves roll in. At night, we talked for hours about Tom, about our lives, about the ways we both had learned to let go and hold on at the same time. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and pink, Margaret turned to me and said, "I never thought I'd find a friend like you, Evelyn. I thought I'd spend the rest of my life alone with my memories. But you've given me a new chapter." I squeezed her hand, tears in my eyes. "You've given me one, too. I think Tom would be happy to see us together, two women who loved him, helping each other find joy again." When we returned home, I felt lighter, more hopeful. Susan and the grandchildren greeted us with hugs and stories, eager to hear about our adventures. I shared photos, seashells, and a little jar of sand from the beach, a reminder that life is full of new beginnings, no matter how many years have passed. The Second Bloom Club continued to thrive. Margaret joined us, and together we led workshops on everything from gardening to storytelling. Women from all over town came to share their dreams, their fears, their hopes for the future. I watched as friendships blossomed, as women who had once felt invisible began to shine. I realized that in helping others heal, I was healing myself. One afternoon, as I was working in the garden, Susan joined me, kneeling in the dirt beside me. "Mom, I'm so proud of you," she said, her voice soft. "You've shown me that it's never too late to start over, to find happiness, to make new friends." I smiled, brushing the dirt from my hands.
We're never too old to matter, Susan. We just have to remind ourselves, and everyone else, sometimes. As summer approached, I found myself looking forward to each new day. I planned a family picnic by the lake, started a new painting for the living room, and even agreed to help organize the town's annual garden tour. My life was full, busy, and meaningful in ways I'd never expected. One evening, as I sat on the porch watching the fireflies, Ethan climbed into my lap, his head resting on my shoulder. "Grandma, do you think Grandpa can see us?" I hugged him close, my heart full. "I think he can, sweetheart. I think he's always with us. In the stories we tell, in the love we share, in the memories we keep alive." He nodded, his eyes full of wonder. "I hope he's proud of us." I smiled, feeling a deep sense of peace. "I know he is, Ethan. I know he is." As summer deepened, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had begun with a single letter addressed to Tom. The pain and confusion of that first day had given way to something richer, a tapestry of memories, new friendships, and a deeper understanding of love and loss. I realized that while grief had once felt like a closed door, it had become a doorway to new beginnings. The Second Bloom Club hosted its first summer garden party, and the backyard was filled with laughter, music, and the scent of blooming roses. Margaret and I stood side by side, welcoming women from all over town, some old friends, some new faces, all of them eager to share in the joy of community. Susan and the grandchildren helped set up tables, string lights, and serve lemonade. Ethan ran around with his friends, his laughter ringing out like music.
During the party, Margaret pulled me aside. "Evelyn, do you ever think about how different things might have been if that letter had never arrived?" I looked around at the garden, at the women talking and laughing, at my family gathered close. Sometimes, but I think we were meant to find each other. I think Tom would have wanted us to help each other heal. She smiled, her eyes shining. I think so too. Later that evening, as the sun set and the fireflies began to dance, Susan stood up and raised her glass. "To Mom and Margaret for showing us all that love never really ends, and that it's never too late to start a new chapter." Everyone cheered, and I felt tears prick my eyes. I looked at Margaret, at Susan, at the grandchildren, and I knew that every moment of pain, every question, every letter had led us to this place of peace and connection. As the party wound down and the guests drifted home, I sat on the porch with Margaret, watching the stars appear one by one. We talked about the future, about more trips, more garden parties, more stories to share. I realized that while Tom was gone, his love was still here, woven into the fabric of our lives, guiding us forward. The next morning, I woke early and walked through the garden, the dew sparkling on the grass. I thought about the letter that had started it all, about the fear and uncertainty it had brought, about the healing and hope that had followed. I realized that while I would always miss Tom, I was no longer defined by my loss. I was defined by the love I gave, the life I lived, the family and friends I cherished. As the days grew longer and the world turned toward autumn once more, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. I knew there would still be hard days, still be moments when the ache of missing Tom would catch me by surprise. But I also knew that I was not alone. I had Susan, I had the grandchildren, I had Margaret, and I had the memories that would always be a part of me. One evening, as I sat on the porch with Ethan, he looked up at me and said, "Grandma, do you think you'll ever get another letter for Grandpa?" I smiled, brushing his hair back. "Maybe, but I think the most important letters are the ones we write to each other every day with our words and our actions and our love." He nodded, thoughtful, and I hugged him close, feeling the warmth of his small body against mine. That night, as I slipped Tom's ring onto my finger and climbed into bed, I whispered a quiet thank you for the years we'd shared, for the lessons I had learned, for the strength to keep going. I knew there would be more challenges ahead, more moments of sadness and longing, but I also knew that I was ready for whatever came next. Surrounded by the people I loved, guided by the lessons I had learned, and fueled by the quiet, unstoppable strength that comes from knowing you are never truly alone. And that, I realized, was the greatest gift Tom had ever given me. The courage to keep loving, to keep living, to keep finding beauty in the world, no matter how many times my heart had been broken.